Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a beer, it's time for some Path of Exile discussion. Today, I wanted to talk about the Hateforge unique item, and particularly a controversial middle-of-the-league nerf that was made to it, which doesn't affect most people that are using Hateforge, but did break one or two specific builds. And also the sort of discussion that's come out of that and where GGG are going to move forward from here. So a quick recap, Hateforge is an item that has tremendous synergy with Vaal attack skills. This is an item that drops from the Trailmaster, from the Ultimatum content. It's a genuinely rare drop. It doesn't seem to be available below about tier 11 maps, and it's also quite rare in those higher tier maps. And it is an extremely powerful item. So firstly, Socketed Gems are supported by level 30 Rage is an interesting one. Rage is a support gem that doesn't get used all that much, but is very strong when you raise its level. So basically, level 30 Rage adds 2.5 times as much flat physical damage to attacks as level 20 Rage grants. So it is miles better than it looks, that line. Next up, you have increased armor. Yep, neither here nor there. These are not gloves that provide a massive amount of armor anyway. And then we have all of the key build enabling functions of this item. So firstly, 10 to 25% reduced rage cost of skills. Because Hateforge is such an expensive item, the fact that it's going to cost you an average of 16 Divine Orbs to perfect this role is basically neither here nor there. If you can afford Hateforge, you can afford 16 Divine Orbs to get it up to a perfect 25%, and you can afford a lot more than 16 if you have bad luck, and it ends up taking you, if it ends up taking you 50, if you can afford Hateforge, you can afford 50 Divine Orbs as well. But then you've got the key thing, the key line that makes it such a build-enabling and powerful item. Vaal attack skills cost rage instead of requiring souls to use. Now you'll notice I skipped over 3 words there, you use yourself. That's because that was the middle of the league nerf that was made to this item. So, what people had noticed, a small number of players had noticed that you could use Hateforge in conjunction with traps and mines, and that this was fairly powerful, but it wasn't breaking the game apart or anything like that. It was just a solid way to play around with this item and to basically use its power in a fair way. What no one had realized was that you could use Vaal attack skills that were linked to Ballista Totem. Ballista Totem is so off-meta that most people forget that it exists. But what it lets you do is modify a bow attack skill so that instead of it being used by you, you instead conjure a totem and that uses that bow attack skill for you. And what was completely broken was the interaction between Hateforge and Ballista Totems that were linked to Vaal Burning Arrow or Vaal Rain of Arrows. I think Vaal Rain of Arrows was probably the more broken of these. So what would happen is you would have to pay the rage cost to summon the totem, and that rage cost would be considerable, but then that totem could just continue using these Vaal skills without limit. And this is something that is kind of ridiculous because Vaal Rain of Arrows and Vaal Burning Arrows are very much balanced around not being something that you can sit there and spam. And even with all of the drawbacks of using a Ballista Totem, this was such a broken interaction that when GGG discovered it, they realized, okay, we have to emergency patch this out. The problem was that the emergency patch that they used ended up breaking the trap and mine interactions, which were not as broken, which were just sort of fair enough, solid solid uses of the skill, but were not causing the game to break or anything like that. And so Rory Rackham from GGG has said that they're committed internally to redoing this nerf in such a way that the Vaal Burning Arrow uses and the Vaal Rain of Arrows uses, which to GGG's knowledge, no players had worked out. This is something they theory crafted internally was possible and problematic, but that no players were actually using in the league. They're going to keep those broken, but then at the same time, they're going to restore the original functionality on traps and mines. So if you're interested in Rory's post, I will put a link to it below. I won't show it in the video because it's hard to read and it will flashbang you all. So let's skip out on that. Okay, so the other things with Hateforge, though, that are really worth noting is that this is a very successful chase item in this league. So you'll notice here that in trade-enabled softcore, Hateforge is trading currently at a whopping 70 exalts. I'm always happy to see new league items be at a mixture of different price points, some of which are put at the point where they're basically almost inaccessible, and some of them found at, some of them much more common, much more accessible to the sort of a type of player that might run 150 or 200 maps in the entire league and just wants to play around with a new toy. Hateforge, though, is definitely at that chase item section where you're going to need to run several thousand maps in order to be able to afford this, or alternately, you're going to need to play a fair bit of Path of Economy. I do like it when there are new items like this added. That said, I think that the very best balance that they've got was when they added the unique dual voices back in the Delirium League. Voices has 4 different versions. One of them that has 1 burnt socket, which is phenomenally expensive. In fact, let's just go and bring up the prices on voices. It's not a unique accessory, it's a unique jewel. And we'll just demonstrate exactly how it works. The most expensive unique item in the game is voices with 1 burn socket. Voices with 3 burn sockets is about a third of that price. Voices with 5 burnt sockets is much more common, but is still quite good and goes for about 4.5 exalts at the moment. And voices with 7 burnt sockets is only slightly worse actually than the 5 passives version, but is a lot cheaper because there's plenty of these to go around. So if a player wants to use this item, they can start with the 7 passive one. They get the core functionality of the item, then they can upgrade from it to a meaningfully better version when they've got a bit of currency behind them. Then if they get a lot of currency behind them, then they can compete with all of the other traders out there to try and get one of the very rare 3 passive ones, or one of the absolutely perfect ones. But these are very extreme luxury upgrades that do make the item better, but that aren't required for it to be used. I kind of think it would be great to see, for instance, on Hateforge, were they to make it so that you could get different versions of it, perhaps have the chase version that is 25% reduced rage cost of skills, then have a considerably more accessible version that's 15% reduced rage cost of skills. It's a lot worse. It's going to mean that you've got to use a cheaper support gem. You can't use the best support gem. You're going to have to use a cheaper one that costs less mana. But it's still something that allows you to get the core functionality of the item. So that's something I'd like to see done in the future, but that's my opinion. Ultimately, if you have been playing around with Hateforge, then unless you had theory crafted one of the truly broken builds around Ballista Totems, you're not going to notice this nerf, except maybe for the next few days during the period where it can't be used on traps and mines. But like GGG have said, it's going to that use case is going to come back. Additionally, Rory's post on Reddit does hint that they consider this item maybe a bit too good, and so it may well be nerfed in 3.15. But that said, if they nerf it a bit in 3.15, it may still well be very good. And I kind of hope that they leave it in a powerful place where it's not so good that players feel compelled to re-roll into it, but that it is genuinely something that people want to use. Anyways, going to leave it there. If you've got any comments or questions, fire away below. Otherwise, I hope you have a good one, and may your Vaal Orbs have interesting results.